Panelists, thank you all for being here this morning.
You are welcome.
That was me, and I was actually muted, but I sighed so loudly that you heard it because my mic leaks. Yes. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Office Hours, another day where we're going to answer your tech questions. We do that literally 24/7. You can put your questions in. Let's get right to them. Alexander, what do we got on our list today?
Our first one this morning is from Douglas Carmichael. Alex, you mentioned clocking being a major issue when connecting digital audio devices. When would an external word clock be useful?
And Alex is temporarily away. Alexander Knight's going to start us off here. Alexander?
Yeah, there are quite a few reasons to get an external clock. One thing on lesser audio interfaces, you may have an internal clock with substandard components where you get drift over time. And so clocking is really key to eliminate things like clicking, popping, and jitter and that type of thing. So that's one reason if the internal clock is insufficient and drifts over time. Of course, on higher-end audio devices, when you get into higher-end stuff from brands like Apogee and Universal Audio, and even the higher-end Focusrite stuff in the RedNet line, the components are going to be of a much higher quality, which includes a much better quality clock. And oftentimes, you don't really need that. Other reasons in high-end mastering setups, getting an external clock, I mean, there are companies that make bespoke external clocks that are so precise and accurate, but they're many thousands of dollars. So if that is critical in a mastering environment, then it would make sense to get something like that. But yeah, it's really just to eliminate jitter and clicks and pops and that kind of thing. And the clock is really key and integral to keeping that timing.
Alex Lindsay, good morning.
Good morning. Most of the time, you want to have a good clock, but when we're in a studio environment, we always have a clock that's there. It is Everett's, I think, makes some of the better ones. That ESI also makes some relatively good ones that we've used in the past. So oftentimes you want to do it. The real challenge that we get into, I think, when I was talking about that specifically, is on tours. So if we're coming in to record for one city and there's a band that has a lot of stuff they're doing, and they've got a whole bunch of other bands and they've got a bunch of other things, getting the time to talk to them is hard. And so it is. So that's the challenge that we have, is just we don't have time to ring it out, and so oftentimes we want to backstop into getting the analog channels, with some boxes that are there, because they have a lot of analog outs oftentimes, and they they have a lot of distribution for that. But we've done it where we go, hey, we have Maddie or we have Dante, and they're like, that's great, and it just has. I'm not saying it couldn't ever work out. It just never has. So anyway, when we work in environments where we have a couple days of load in, we've used Dante a lot for that, because we have time to work out the issues about what's controlling what. But usually in concerts, we're going into a moving train that has to land very, very quickly, and we just haven't been just keeping it as simple as possible. It turned out to be the best way to go.
Words of wisdom. I remember even back from the days when we used to have Blackbursts going around a studio so everybody could have their cameras in sync and things like that. It's a timing thing, and it's gotten much more complicated with everybody in far-flung places trying to keep in synchronized, when you might have, as we do here on Office Hours, people in Europe and Asia all contributing to a same central thing. Those timing issues become more and more important. So hopefully...
Mickey said +1 for Everett's for sync generators and Avid for word clock generators.
There we go. So two forms of keeping things following the same conductor, so to speak. Let's go to the next question.
Next one's from Harold Williams in Portsmouth, Virginia. I wanted to buy a KVM switch from Amazon, but I wasn't sure which one to choose. I decided to go with the one that had the most reviews. How can you determine if a KVM switch is good? What should I be looking for?
Okay, let's start with Jeffrey Powers. Jeffrey, good morning.
Hey, morning. The first thing that you wouldn't do is look at the reviews, because even though Amazon does a good job in weeding out the fake reviews, there's still a lot of people that plug something in, they say, I love it, and then they forget about it and they come back to it, and then they find out they really didn't love it. I did buy a KVM, a really cheap KVM, a year ago when I had my backup computer set up to a monitor with another computer, and it was not a great experience. Mostly because what you need is a KVM that's going to have to keep power going through the USB devices as it switches back and forth. Otherwise, certain computers will get confused, especially when you don't have an operating GUI to them, something like a Linux kernel or anything like that. So you want to be able to make sure that it has the power. I go with, if you really want the cheapest that works decent, anything from Belkin usually will do the job. And then companies like Trip Light that deal more into enterprise KVMs. They're going to be a little bit more expensive, but they're going to be a little bit more reliable too.
Paul Walhus.
Yeah, thank you. I've used KVMs forever, and the last KVM I got on Amazon was a TES Smart, TESMART, and it's a pretty good brand. You got to evaluate: are you using one monitor or two? Are you using HDMI? How many USB devices are you going to support? And that TES Smart is still in the box. I haven't even opened it. I ordered it about a year ago, and I ended up using just my remote PC as my KVM. So you might look at a software solution first before you go spend a lot of money on hardware.
It made me smile a little, because there's been maybe 2 times in my life that I ordered something and I was sure I needed, and exactly like you just said, it sat in the box for a year and then I sold it off because I never used it. But that's not common. Alexander, your thoughts?
Yeah, I have a brand that I like, and I'll get to that in a sec. But you're right, Harold. It's always a bit of a gamble when you buy these products. I think Jeffrey's advice is good. You have to be really careful with reviews. For me, I largely ignore reviews. I look at the product specifications, and I know the problem that I have, and I know the problem that needs to be solved. So I look at the specs and see if does it solve these problems. Is there anything that stands out that annoys me? That kind of thing, like on a KVM switch, like a built-in speaker that you cannot disable. So I always look for that. Does it have a web interface that I can control? That kind of thing. So those are all things to think about, but you come to the right place because, everyone on this panel has bought hardware that they've really liked and some that they didn't like so much from Amazon. So asking here is always a good way to kind of poll everybody and see what kind of products that they like. The brand that Paul mentioned, I have had a lot of success with as well. I'm not sure how they say their name properly, if it's Test Smart or T Smart, but I have two different products from them. I have a 8-port KVM switch, which has HDMI and USB, which is what I use to switch between all of my different computers. And I've been using that for about 6 months. It's been rock solid. I also have a 4-port, 4x4 HDMI matrix, which I've had for over a year, and it's been absolutely rock solid. It does 4K 60. There's no web interface for it, which I wish it kind of had, but it does the auto negotiation of the EDID, and it seems to work pretty flawlessly. It does not do downscaling. That's one feature I wish it had. It won't go from 4K to 1080p, but otherwise it's been pretty flawless, and I leave them running 24/7 in my rack. Haven't had a single issue.
There you go. Alex Lindsay.
I'll just show you which one I got, and then I use it every day, all day. So this is an 8-port. Now, what I will say is that I don't use the HDMI part. I'm sure it works fine, but I don't use it. All I need is to switch my keyboard from computer to computer to computer. I've got a lot of computers on my desk, but this is the one that I use. It's an 8-port. And I think it's useful just to talk about what the decision process was. Number one is it's flat on the top and it doesn't have any buttons on the top. And that means that I can put other things on it and slide it into things and make it work. So a lot of them have buttons on the top, and that usually makes it not very useful for me. I needed physical buttons across the front. I wanted to make sure that I can just reach over and push a button and switch to the thing that I'm pushing the button, not scroll through them, but push the button for the computer that I want to control. So that was a requirement that a lot of them don't have. It has I wanted to have the USB stuff on the front. That's not a hard requirement, but it's pretty important to me to be able to put things, the controllers into the front that I have for it. It is all these are coming straight out of the back. That was important to me because it was because I'm where I have it stacked. I want everything leaving the back, not the top or the side or some kind of crazy thing like that. And then it also has an RS-232, which I haven't used, but I bought it partially because it had it, so that I could be able to send commands from a touch interface to this. And there's not a lot, but there are other ones that do that. Not very many, but that you can get them, and higher end ones all have that, so that you can send controls to it to make those simple changes. So that's why I bought this one specifically. It wasn't particularly expensive. It's worked now for years, so it's worked out. The only problem that I had with it was that it had a loud beep every time you changed it, and you couldn't get rid of the beep. So I found that the way to fix that was to take it apart, and take out the PZO speaker, and put it back together. That took about 10 minutes to rip that part out. And I literally ripped it out. I just grabbed it with pliers and just twisted until it popped out, and then I went back to my regularly scheduled program. And it doesn't make any noise now. So anyway, it is it's so outside of that one little addition or change, it's been rock solid and works well.
Didn't do a video on vocal cord surgery for your
exactly. Yeah, I'm not. I just pulled it out, and it doesn't make it. They're not nearly as
in the 1800s.
Yeah, exactly.
Alexander Knight.
I just wanted to mention one more thing about the Test Smart KVM, because the one that I use to switch my computers, I haven't implemented it yet, but I would strongly suggest looking at that one because it's reasonably priced. I wouldn't say it's cheap. There are cheaper KVMs. The other cool thing about that one is that it not only does RS-232, but it also has a network port on it. So you can actually program it, send TCP commands to it, and you can actually switch computers. They have a Windows-only app, which will allow you to trigger those commands to switch between USB outputs. I haven't tested that yet. I do have a Windows PC that I can use for that, but my goal is to actually get that thing working on my Stream Deck. But if you want something that you can access on your network and possibly integrate that into a Stream Deck workflow where you just push a button and it'll switch between computers, that one's a pretty good one. I think it's $250, $300 is what I paid for it.
I'm trying to think of the last time I touched an RS-232 connection. It's been a decade or so, I think, but valuable if you need it. Next question.
Zach Salsmuth in Chautauqua, New York is asking, I have a 12U rack that I want to be production ready for broadcast and recording. Needs to incorporate USB-C for ATEM mini video and audio, Ethernet, and 2 HDMI outports. Is there a rack mount computer that is the right tool for this job?
Jeffrey Powers is going to start us off. Jeffrey?
Hey, Zach. So yes and no. It really depends on whether you're running in a Windows environment or you're running in a Mac environment. If you're running in a Mac environment, you could probably do a Mac Mini and get a rack shelf that you would put the Mac Mini on. On the PC side, you could actually build yourself a computer that is also that also is a 1U or 2U that you just slide right in there. I have like 3 or 4 different 2U computers that run into rack mounts. So both of them will do the job. One's just a shelf, and the other one's you're building a computer on it.
Paul Waldes.
I'd say if you're using a PC to go with Supermicro, they have the most diverse line of rack mount computers in many form factors, and you want to watch that you get the right removable drives so that you can swap drives from one rack mount computer to another. And it's just such a broad subject. I could go on and on about rack mount computers.
Alex Lindsay.
Yeah, the what we've used for almost, I don't know, a decade or more is our Mac Minis and you can have one Mac Mini and have a video card or something on the other half, or you can have one with 2 Mac Minis that'll fit into one RU. So those are really powerful. And now with the newer Mac Minis, the M series Mac Minis, it's going to be hard to compete with those for what you're probably trying to do as far as the utility of it. And I wouldn't buy immediately, only because we expect Apple to do their announcement next week for the new Mac Minis, which should be M4 Mac Minis and maybe a dramatically different form factor.
Good advice. Next question.
Gordon Lake in Los Angeles, California is asking, after seeing Runway's Act 1, I'm starting to believe facial expressions could beat realism in most TV spots. Do you agree?
Big question. Jeffrey Powers, you want to weigh in on it?
So yeah, I was looking at this at the videos that they were showing off, and there were a couple scenes where it really looked like that there was somebody there. It wasn't AI generated by any means. There's 43 muscles in the face, and so being able to, as you see me talk, I'm moving a lot of them, even though I have Bell's palsy, and so a lot of my muscles don't work the way that most people's do. But you see the eyebrows raise, you see the cheeks start to flare, and go from there. And that's the one thing that's always bugged me with AI. If you watch some of these AI generators, even though the faces are moving, you'll see like their bodies are just kind of very stagnant. And so having all that muscle movement, because a lot of things happen in there, is going to work. We're on a good direction to making it into something perfect. But there were a couple times that I looked at each of the clips and go, yeah, I could still tell that it's AI generated.
Alex.
I think that it is getting closer. I think that it's not there yet. When I look at the stuff that I see here, it would be good for inexpensive ads that you're trying to do, local cable, maybe some a little bit better than that, and for effect, having something talk could be really funny, so I think that is I think that you could use it for effect probably better than trying to slip it in and have it not be the thing. But I will say that it's getting much better, but behind a very high end ad, it may look kind of square. There's a lot of work there, and there's a lot of going back and forth, and there's a lot of revisions and a lot of takes, and I think that it's going to take a little longer than we think to get to there. I think that I think for I think this is already ready to go for previs. I mean, this will revolutionize how we do pre-visualization. But I'm not sure. I think that, again, trajectory 2 or 3 years from now, maybe. Maybe. Right now, probably not quite yet.
It's a fascinating topic. And of course, those of us who do voice work are talking about this all the time. Where is the uncanny valley? How do you get up the far slope of it? All those discussions are rippling through the talent pool in the industry. It's a fascinating discussion. Go ahead.
One of my pastimes is that they have a lot of them where they show people from history and they give them life. They take their images and then they produce a AI version of them and then they show them smiling or talking to other people or whatever. And I do find that to be fairly engaging, just to see like what Alexander the Great or whatever looked like, or what they obviously they're guessing to some degree, but I think that kind of stuff, and it's getting better. It's still pretty rough, but I think we are going to get. We're going to see a lot more here. And the big thing is that it's measuring the movement or the facial movement, but it's not, it's making a lot of AI calculations to fill in the gaps of what it's not getting from the measurement. I think that's what's really interesting.
Yeah, the other thing for me is as somebody does a lot of voice work, I was sitting there doing a narration the other day, and it was a nonfiction title. It was something to do with, actually with golf. And I found myself thinking, okay, add some more nuance to this, because if not, I'm going to be sounding just like AI. So it was actually starting to mentally think, what can I do to make this more humanly special, as opposed to, I can read in a monotone and even things out. But it was interesting that it's affecting me kind of psychologically like that, and I'm trying to position myself as somebody who can do more than just what the AI can do. And for whatever that's worth, that's just a fascinating way that it's affecting me as a performer in this stuff. So, next question.
Zach Stallsmith in Chautauqua, New York is asking, does anyone use a VPN to remotely access files on your home server from anywhere, or do you rely on something like an app for your network-attached storage software to achieve that?
Paul Wallace, start us out.
Yeah, I use the combination I use, I can't imagine anything better. It's a Synology NAS connected to a Ubiquiti Dream Machine SE. It's a special edition Dream Machine. And I have one in Hot Springs and I have one in Austin, and they synchronize very well. I just can't imagine anything that would be better than that. After using that, the interface is effortless, and it gives you such rich details, and the app infrastructure is amazing. They just have so many apps that synchronize Google Drive and do so many different things.
Alex Lindsay.
Yeah, Mickey said that he uses VPN. I also have an SFTP shares on some of my NASs for direct external uploads and downloads by production houses, clients, etc. They are all on their own public IPs. Primarily, I use a VPN for those things, and there's a whole variety of them. Most of my experience has been with Meraki, but also Ubiquiti and others have solid VPN solutions. And then it's not just you're getting access to the drives; you're getting access to all the computers that are there for screen share.
Nice. Next question.
From the QR code, Robert White in Jacksonville, Florida. I've finally graduated from a free Zoom account to a Zoom business account. What new features should I implement first?
Alexander Knight, start us off.
Well, that's a big upgrade. Congratulations, Robert. First thing I would do is make sure you go into your Zoom admin portal and turn on Group HD, and then file a support ticket to the people at Zoom, and just make sure they flip on 1080p in the back end. Usually takes them a few days. They're a little slow. I find 2 to 3 days, and then it will appear in your account. And once you've got that on, it's going to look fantastic.
Paul Wallace?
Yeah, I would start out using the advanced calendaring and scheduling features.
Okay, Alex.
Yeah, and if you're going from the basic Zoom account, obviously you can just let the meeting roll because it'll last a lot longer now, more than 40 minutes. The other thing is, as far as the 1080p, I think that has become a lot more. What's happened in the past is you need 10 business accounts to make the request for 1080p. So if you're part of a larger network, that might be the case. But that has changed a bit with the new rollout of the way that Zoom is handling events and the events platform. So if you sign up for events, you can. There is and I probably need to have it all written down in front of me. But basically, for $149 a month, you can have all of the tools for events, but you can also have all of the liminal tools that come with it, and you get 1080p out of that as well. So what used to be much more expensive to get 1080p, but I don't think that there's a solid way to get 1080p without 10 business licenses to get up to that to get to that threshold. Some people have done it, but it's pretty rare. So you really need to have this new setup where you pay $149. You'll get the 1080p. You'll get all the event tools, and you'll get all the liminal tools. So it's a pretty good deal as a package.
Jeffrey Powers.
So, and of course, it really depends on what you're doing with this Zoom account, if you're actually going to be creating content, if you're just going to be using it for meetings or whatnot. But the first thing that I would go and do is I would go and turn off any type of video enhancement option that you have, because you don't want people showing up as dogs or raising thumbs or anything like that if you're creating something for a consumable market like a YouTube or anything else like that. I'd also just meticulously, because these settings will change in the next update. Meticulously go through each setting and read through it and understand what it means, and then see if that's something that you want or don't want in your Zoom meeting.
Alexander Knight, you wanted to come back in?
Yeah, so I just wanted to let you know, I don't know if this is available in the United States yet, but in Canada, if I go and compare the Zoom plans, I can now buy a Zoom business license, and I can only purchase one, which you were never able to do before. Now, my understanding, I've heard from other people in the U.S. that hasn't shown up on the Zoom homepage, but in Canada here, because I know Pedro Gonzalez messaged me about this, and he VPN'd in to make it look like he was coming from Canada, and he was able to pay the $25 for one Zoom business license, and he got 1080p on his account.
Interesting.
Nice. All right. Tips for being a loyal Office Hours viewer and or listener. Next question.
This one's from the QR code, Curtis Perrin in St. John's, Newfoundland. Does anybody have any knowledge or experience of the new Chauvet video walls? Just trying to seek opinions as to how it fares for the price.
Alex, Lindsay, you raised your hand on this. So you have any experience with this?
I don't have any experience. I'm just going to show it. This is the new wall. So this is one of the a new LED wall. This is a 3.9. They also have, I believe, a 1.5 as I dug into it, which is, I'm sure, is a little bit more expensive. These are obviously not super inexpensive. I can't quite make out the exact dimensions of these, but a 4-pack costs $15,000. So they're $3,000 or $4,000 a unit, which is not out of the question. I think it'll be interesting to see where they go with these. Obviously, in their market, LEDs have become such a hot commodity that it would make sense to start to get those. But a 3.9 would be probably okay for touring. If you're doing that kind of thing. So, but they are starting to roll out. They've been out for about 6 months. It looks like 6 or 7 months, and I haven't run across them. I think Chauvet would be not the first place that I would look for LED walls. So I think that I would need to test them pretty heavily before I went down that path. I mean, I have some Chauvet stuff. It's just not where I'd dump $14,000. Usually when I'm buying Chauvet stuff, it's because it's less than $500. so it's and I need it for this one thing. So putting a lot into it, but they're definitely moving up market with those LED walls, and you can see they're used heavily in EDM and with DJs as well as concerts, and so I can see why that they want to get into that market. But it's a lot of money to spend with a company that hasn't reliability and quality hasn't been their cornerstone for a while.
Alex, before I call on Alexander, I was wondering, did those burn in after a long period of time? What's the lifespan of something like that kind of moderate?
Usually that's not been the way that they die. Usually the way that most of these LED walls die is that they get chipped, at the edges. So you have to be super careful with them. And as that mil spec gets smaller, so as you get to 1.5, everything gets more delicate. And really what happens is you lose a pixel or two and then you can't use them anymore. And so you have to be very careful around those edges when you put them in. But that's they're pretty durable. I've never seen them burn out. Or fade out or whatever. We've had some power supplies go bad that we fix. There's some controllers that get nicked, those kinds of things. Nicked by like someone hitting it or something, not stealing
physical
it.
damage. Yeah.
Physical damage. But the number one thing that happens is that either something hits in the middle, like something falls on it. But the biggest thing is that when people are putting them together, taking them out, storing them, and moving them, they just scrub that edge just a little bit, and those LEDs, to make them look seamless, goes right up to the edge. And you have to be very, very, so you have to take them off very carefully. And a lot of times, you have stagehands. You have stagehands that are not, that aren't soft
Not a
hands,
group known for delicacy.
So the folks that I know that are using high performance, like very, tight mil spec, usually won't let anyone else touch them. They're kind of, nobody else can touch these other than us. And they'll bring a technician in and they'll hire. Oftentimes they'll be told, oh, well, the union has to do it. And they just hire a shadow to, hire a match to stand there and watch them do it. But they're not going to, they're fine to pay the union for the extra person, but they're not going to have anybody else touch those other than them, and that
makes sense
because it's really a precision process.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Alexander Knight.
Alex, can you speak to the dot pitch? Because I know we've talked previously with LED walls and that whole issue with Moire. Chauvet's claiming 3.9 millimeter dot pitch. I don't have a reference point. Is that good? Is it bad? Is
it's not particularly good. But what I would say is that it depends. So the problem you get into is that as you get smaller, so the spec that when you say 3.9 millimeter or 1.5 millimeter or 8 millimeter, which some of them are, they are it's how the distance, the number of millimeters between the center of each of each LED. And so the issue is as it gets smaller, obviously you get a lot less moire. There's less pattern there for the cameras to grab onto, so that works out better. But it also becomes more delicate and more expensive. In some cases, if you're doing outdoor work, you go to higher, a higher spec. So you have 5s, 8s, those types of things. And the reason you do that is because it allows air to flow through the LED wall. Because if you don't do that and you put up a 1.5 mil, you put up a giant sail, in a stadium. So you
very
can't,
expensive giant sail.
very, very, very expensive giant and dangerous sail. And so you have to lower that spec actually, because those ones actually allow air to go. They're designed to allow air to go through them and lights. So I actually worked on a show where they shot, they hazed the space, and they have LEDs, and then they have backlights, cobs that are in the back that are pushing light through the LED wall, which was pretty cool effect. So that can, there are ways to use it, but as that mill gets bigger, as the spec gets bigger, you get more and more moire. Now, some of that can be managed with an OLPF, low pass filter, optical low pass filter will get rid of some of the moire, but moire is a real problem. And even if there isn't moire, the nature of how LEDs are lit will defeat a lot of temporal compression and make it very hard to stream live. And so we oftentimes just go, hey, you should put this 9 feet above so we don't see it. Or you have to get to a very tight spec. Usually we say 1.7 is the outer range that we recommend, or a very, very deep stage, or both. So as long as the bokeh overcomes the moire, you're okay, so.
I was surprised at that wind load thing, because I was driving in Las Vegas the last time we were there for NAB, and I drove by the Sphere, and I got close enough to it to where I thought, oh, that's not actually a solid thing. It's just a whole bunch of ribs with those LEDs on the outside. And I thought, that makes sense. If you got a huge wind, that thing is so gigantic that a solid wall that size would be at risk all the time. So fascinating. All right, next question.
This one's from Gabriel Ung in Malaysia. What are best practices to avoid SDI burnout? I had PTZ SDI port die on me, and I'm wondering what could have caused it. I have heard of last in, first out. Does it apply for equipment within a flight case and connecting to external SDI accessories?
Jeffrey Powers, what do you think?
A lot of good questions here. I'll answer best practices for the SDI cable. Excuse me. First of all, you want to have a good shielded cable. If you have a cable that's bad, if it looks even wonky, I would take it out of the system and then plug it in. Have an SDI tester available for your cables just to make absolutely sure. Try to plug everything in separately into different power outlets. That way you're running less of a risk with anything. Grounding yourself, so when if you touch the camera, you get a little shock. That can definitely mess on the SDI cable. Once again, with power, if you want to have some sort of controlled power, a power conditioner, that's always a good thing. They always recommend using the power plug with the SDI. You can plug in power over Ethernet, but don't put a ton of stuff into that same switch if you're using that, because you can then definitely run it. I test all my plugs with this simple guy right here to make absolutely sure that it's there. I also have a voltmeter, which I'm not sure where it is right now. So if I really am not sure of the power that I'm plugging into, I have two items to actually test it out and make sure that the voltage is right and make sure that it's wired correctly. Let's see what else. Anything else is, like I said, test the outlets, make sure you're on controlled power. And sometimes it's not a bad idea to put your cameras on a battery power rather than plugging in if you're really not sure of the power source.
Alex Lindsay.
Yeah, Mickey also said I would investigate the systems that have multiple paths to ground as different ground potentials. A defective piece of equipment in your system is using the SDI connections as a ground path, and that could definitely be, managing grounds gets important when you start plugging a lot of electronics to each other. So understanding what those are and either having a unified ground or proper grounds are pretty important. I would say the number one reason that we see a failure is mechanical. Someone put it in a little too hard a couple times, or someone stepped on the line while it was in there. So grounds can be the problem, and maybe you didn't have that, but that is by far like 99% of the time when an SDI signal goes bad, it's because of rough handling. That's been the primary scene, but we have seen some voltage, some ground issues kill a couple of them.
Don't forget, this entire show is run based on your questions. So if you'd like to put your questions in, you can do that by going to askofficehours.global or use the QR code. Whoops, I've hit the wrong thing. I'm sorry about that. Use the QR code that's coming up on the bottom of your screen right now. You can shoot that with anything that reads QR codes, and it'll take you to the system, the fastest way to get in. If you'd like to get a little more in-depth, you can join us at officehours.global. Go to the main website, follow the trail to sign up, and kind of get on the mailing list. And at that point, you can not just read and interact with the questions as we do on the show every day, but you can actually vote on the questions. And the questions with the most votes get our attention quicker and are discussed at more length. So that's how kind of you can affect the programming of the show. All right, enough for the PSA. It's time to go right back to questions. What do we got next, Alexander?
This one's from Tony Mobley in Noonan, Georgia. Is there a good solution to connecting SSD device to an iPhone USB-C for extended recording?
Alexander, take us into this.
Yeah, I mean, of course, you can use any SSD with USB-C. However, I haven't tested this one, but this one looks like a really cool product. It was announced a few months ago from Lexar, and they come in 1 and 2 terabyte models. And this is specifically designed for people building these, camera rigs centering around an iPhone. And I like the form factor because first of all, it's really tiny, as you can see, and it just plugs direct into the bottom of the USB-C port. So it's basically sits flush with the phone itself there. Reliability, I don't know. Lexar is a pretty good SSD brand. I've had pretty good luck with Lexar, much better luck than SanDisk lately. It looks like the 1 terabyte model is $159 USD, and the 2 terabyte model is $239 USD. So Perhaps somebody on the panel or in the community has had a chance to buy one and test one, but looks like a pretty cool product.
Paul Waldus.
Yeah, a little better deal and a very popular drive would be the SanDisk Extreme, it's called, and the 2 terabyte is 154 and the 4 terabyte is 280. And from an industrial design standpoint, it's a real nice looking, design. There are a lot of novel solutions that use like MagSafe and like what Alexander showed, but I would just go with that SanDisk if it was me.
Alex Lindsay.
Yeah, the Crucial makes some X10s, and you can see this one is connected. Oops, I was connected to my phone a second ago. Here, hold on. Let me see if I can see what's going on there. No, stop.
You just did that to make me feel better.
Oh, you know
when
what?
I cut
It's
the
funny.
video.
You can't mirror the Blackmagic camera when the Blackmagic. I was going to show it to you in the Blackmagic camera. You can select, a USB-C. So if you're recording something, you can select it. I don't know how the other apps work on it, but when we recorded it, we do it with the Blackmagic camera because we're recording a lot of data, and so you can plug it in. But you plug any USB into there. I think that the X10s are pretty inexpensive. They don't run well on. They don't run consistently over 50% when you're doing 6K RAW from a Blackmagic camera, but they will record okay from the phone. So that's something to kind of think about as you look at those. And they're, again, a lot of bang for your buck as far as getting those out there. Oyen is another company that makes some great ones that I've used that are a little bit more stable for recording for those types of things, and I have a couple of those. And then Condor Blue makes one that is designed to attach to your rig. So if you have a hard rig that you want to have there, Condor Blue has they just came out with it a couple weeks ago. I think we talked about it on the show. That will literally just latch onto your rig, which I think is a pretty cool solution.
Absolutely. But we visited them in NAB. Pretty sophisticated and pretty well engineered option, it looks like. Jeffrey Powers.
Sorry, I decided to grab something last second here. So this is more about I think this is more about the hub that you're asking for, not about the drive that you want to put into there. And of course, I've had a lot of experience doing the at-home kits with Android and using a little docking station to doing that. Not all docking stations are going to work that well because it's all about that chipset inside there. So if you're trying to look for a docking station, I would look at the pluggable and what they've got, because they do have a smaller docking system that you can put into your phone and be able to attach your hard drives or anything like that. If you're not totally remote on this camera, you can definitely go into the higher end docks like the OWC. I love this one. This is the Mercury Elite Pro Dual, and the best part about it is it's got 2 drives in there. You can set it up to I think it's like 32 terabytes with both drives, but it's also got additional docks in there. It doesn't have SD cards options, so if you're looking for something like that, then you definitely want to do that. But the less plugs, the better. And then, like I said, those 2 brands I would stick with if you're looking for a hub.
Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer from Vieira, Florida. macOS desktop files/folders randomly disappear. Desktop blank in Finder 2. The search reveals items, desktop normal on reboot, then it happens again. Updated from Ventura to Sequoia. Problems persist. Ideas.
Let's start with Jeffrey Powers. Jeffrey?
Before I go with the shotgun approach and saying just reinstall the whole system, check to see what peripherals you have set up onto your computer. Also, check your software if you have any type of cleaning programs or anything like that running. Sometimes they have been known to kind of move things, not take them off, but move them somewhere else. The Finder is a really interesting part of that whole thing because, like, for instance, if you have multiple monitors hooked up, maybe they're switching monitors, so that's not the primary monitor anymore, and all your files move over to the secondary monitor. If you go through the system, you don't see anything like that, then I would definitely probably just wipe the whole thing and start from scratch.
Alex Lindsay.
You may have to do what Jeffrey said. I think that the other thing I would look at is disk space. Do you have a very low disk space can cause a lot of anomalies within the Mac operating system because it can't write its database. So that's something else to look at. Daniel Partridge also said, do you have parallels installed? There's problems that have been reported with that as well. But I would recommend probably taking everything off of it and reinstalling it. I probably wouldn't trust it after it did that. So I'd probably do a fully clean install and see if it works after that.
Good luck, Andy. I know these kind of intermittent something's disappeared off my desktop or something isn't seeing something that I know is there are always a bit of a hassle to track down, and I wish you well in getting it solved. Next question.
From the QR code, David Brady asks, Mac Rumors is reporting that Apple may halt production of Vision Pro by year's end. Is this going to be the 21st century Newton?
Alexander Knight, start us off.
It's too early to tell. I don't think so. A couple things. One, I think this is just Apple exercising their good supply chain management. And obviously, the Vision Pro is a very, very high-end, expensive device. And I'm sure they knew ahead of time that it wasn't going to sell as much as an iPhone, for example. So they're just controlling the whole development line or manufacturing line to reduce costs. The other thing about it becoming the Newton, I don't think so. The Newton was an underpowered device. We just didn't have, it was a great idea, but it was too early for it. And they didn't really have the technology and the hardware. The Vision Pro has a lot going for it in terms of like the engineering behind it. It's the form factor that's really a problem. And everybody knows that they don't really want this heavy pair of goggles on their head. But I think the Vision Pro is just a means to an end. It is a stepping stone to the next best thing, which will be eventually shrinking the form factor down and getting it into a much smaller package and eventually getting it into something that looks like just a regular pair of glasses, which is going to be quite a ways off. But they needed to have something that they could work with and get in the hands of developers to build the apps. And that's one thing that's really lacking right now is the app ecosystem. But again, it's still pretty early. It'll be interesting to see, 12 months from now, where are we at? Are people actually adopting it? Are we building apps for it? Are we trying to build new and engaging experiences with it? I'm excited for what is going to be coming, but I haven't quite seen it yet.
Alex Lindsay.
You had to build this one first. So you had to build the one that is the highest quality that you can muster, because that shows people what they can build for. If you build something that is at 2,000 pixels per, 2,000 wide, 1080p per eye or something lower, then everyone builds for that. And then you end up with not a lot of content that people actually want to see. The 4K per eye or where they're at, and potentially up to 8K per eye, is just barely enough, to be honest, to really turn this over. The 90 frames per second is just barely enough this is really, while it seems very expensive, it's a minimum viable product. It is exactly what you needed to do to get the content out there. It's not that important that a lot of people bought it or not. This is a big test unit. So it's you have the people who are the first adopters that are there. Will it be the 21st century Newton? We will know probably by 2030. Because that's how long Apple will keep making this. Apple's doesn't go, hey, we're going to do something, and then a year later go, never mind. It's just not really their style, And so I think that you're going to find that with all the rollout and everything else, I think we keep on seeing proof that there's a lot of dry powder. Like Apple keeps releasing things in spatial and everything else that you realize they've shot a lot of stuff, and we still haven't seen the Blackmagic camera, which I think is going to make a remarkable difference in the availability. I think what happens when something like the Blackmagic camera rolls out is that you're going to suddenly see a flood. Because right now it is so hard to shoot that dual 180 stereo at high resolution and high frame rate. That's an art project. Like it's hundreds of thousands of dollars to get that to work well. And so if they're releasing a product with the software that allows you to edit it and work on it, which is in Resolve, they're, for $25,000, $35,000. If it's under $35,000, remember you're renting it, so it's not going to cost $35,000 to. You're not going to buy one of them. I mean, some people buy them. I'm going to try to find someone to buy one. I can't afford it either. But you're going to be able to. You're going to see a big increase in the amount of content that's suddenly available in this format. Will that sell more? Headsets probably not immediately, but it does allow them to start figuring out what the medium is. And I think one of the challenges is that Meta has a hard time with the content because people who buy the Meta Quests are over 30, and all their content is aimed at 25 and under. You're just like, so they have this. They're just making lots of content that no one's watching. So I think that's they want the market to be somewhere where it isn't. And I think that's a real challenge. And I think Apple is probably honing in on the market that they have more effectively, or will. And so I think that is. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity here. I think for us as media developers, we want to be very careful to eschew what Apple's working on, because as someone who has made a lot of money being on the front edge of things, I highly recommend it. Once things have normalized and they become commoditized, you're competing with everybody on triple bids. When you are the only ones that can do it, or one of only 10 companies that know how to do it, you're not commoditized. You can charge what it takes to do it and what it takes to figure it out. And so I would highly recommend being on the front end of this than the back end. And I think this is the front end of a pretty big wave. When I put my headset on, there's not enough content, but the experience is amazing, and so I think that's usually a good sign. It's when you put it on and you go, oh, this is kind of, not very good. It doesn't look very good. It doesn't work very well. Those are the things that keep you go, well, this is probably not going to go anywhere. But when something's really amazing and it's made by the largest company in the world, who's not going to, just the embarrassment of stopping over the next 5 years will keep Apple from doing that, but Apple will, so they'll keep pounding through this, and Apple has a history of doing this. People made fun of the phone, the iPad, the watch. I mean, they made fun of all the AirPods. I mean, the AirPods that we all have now, that people made fun of those stupid white things that are on the side of your ear. No one's ever going to buy those. Now everybody's everybody's wearing them. So I think Apple has gone through this cycle of, it's not, what they're doing isn't going to work, quite a few times, and nugged their way through it. So I wouldn't worry too much yet.
Yeah, I'd ask honestly, would we have the world awash in iPhones if it hadn't been for the Newton? It was their training device to figure out how to do.
I always want to pull out all those articles as Apple, when the rumors of Apple putting out a phone, and all these executives from the cell phone, Kia and all the other, this is too hard. This is welcome to the big world. Like, welcome, and this is all gonna, and if Apple doesn't think it can pull it off, they pulled the plug after tens of billions of dollars on the car because they didn't think they could do it. If they think they can do it, they're going to release it. And a lot of products, it's rumored that a lot of products have gotten to the finish line and then been killed by Apple because they only release things they think they can execute. And so I think that I'm not nearly as worried or concerned or have as much schadenfreude as other people seem to have related to this, because I just think that this may be a really big platform. And as an owner, I will say that I really enjoy it, and I think that is part of it. I think that Apple has not done as much as they could on the content side, but I don't know if they need to. This is a very long game. It's not a short game. So,
Jeffrey Powers, you wanted to weigh in?
Yeah, I totally agree. First of all, Mac Rumors, even though a very reputable news source, is itself a rumor. And from every other article that I read, it was more of the fact that Vision Pro was ramping down their production, not completely getting rid of their production. In fact, there's another rumor that came out, I think it was last month, that the Apple was figuring out how to make the Apple Vision Air, which what I'm guessing is it's going to be like the iPad, it's going to be like the iPhone. You're going to have 3 models to choose from: a high-end model, a mid-grade model, and then of course a low model. So and of course last year when Vision Pro came out, there were a lot of chipset issues for production because they didn't have the amount of production that they needed for the units that they were looking for. And that's not only for the Vision Pro, but that was also for the iPads and the phones and everything like that. So they have to focus on the phones and the iPads and the MacBooks first, and then the Vision Pros. Eventually, maybe the Vision Pros will become higher end or higher in that production line. But right now, yeah, as Alexander said earlier, they're looking at their numbers. They're not going to release something that they're not to 100% on. And I think Vision Pro is going to be out there and definitely competing with things like Facebook's Quest.
Mark next question.
Mark Giuliani in Washington, D.C. We are getting ready to cover election results. We are looking into both H2R and SPX as graphics programs for lower thirds. The state of Delaware provides results in CSV format. How do we automate the process of getting the results to lower thirds?
Alex, can you help him out?
Yeah, I think that, this is a fairly standard format, but I think that what I would do here if I was trying to work it out is, and I think Mickey here agrees with me, is to talk to Tuomo about it. So Tuomo is the writer of SPX, and he's done a lot of custom graphics in projects with office hours. And I think he probably could work with you to process that. So reach out to Tuomo. And John Barker may be willing to do it as well, but I think a lot of times John's got a lot of things going on, and he's got a lot of things that he's developing. And Tuomo, this is what he just kind of focuses on. So you may be able to get him to, I think that a handler for CSV format might take Tuomo like a day to fix.
He probably has a lot of code.
Probably has it laying around.
Values.
They probably used SPX on elections in Finland or whatever. So I think
right.
I would reach out to Tuomo.
Yeah, CSV is so common. Every spreadsheet in the world tosses out that. So I think everybody
just need a
knows how to
handler.
use it.
Yeah.
Next question.
Asma Kajar in Cape Town. We recorded on Blackmagic Pocket Cinema 6K Pro RAW on a Samsung T5 SSD and ProRes on an SD. Is this wise? Audio recorded on camera. We had a big issue. Video playback was at high speed. Video frame turned red halfway. Audio good. Suggestions.
Alex Lindsay. Alex?
I've never done that before, so you're a little outside of this. But what I would say is you're putting a lot of pressure on the camera. Now Mickey says he's seen this before and would switch to recording CFast cards instead of consumer SSDs connected, and that may be the case as well. A couple things to think about is that a lot of these SSDs, the T5s included, become less efficient after they're half full. And really it's about 40%. So you really, if you buy a 1 terabyte SSD, you're buying a 400 gig SSD for a Blackmagic camera. You should not go over that when you make your calculations. Don't fill it up because it basically the writing efficiency starts to drop pretty quickly. So you just really only have that much. And if you buy a 2 gig, you got 800. But that's what we found is the math is about 40% of the SSD for most consumer drives. Now you can get higher performance camera drives that are going to cost 2 or 3 times as much, and that you can fill those ones up. so the OEMs, some of the OEM ones, and a couple other ones can be filled up to 80% without any performance. But the other thing I would say is just remember that what you're doing is you're recording RAW, and then you're scaling it, and then converting it to ProRes, and then putting it on an SD card. All of those things are process intensive. I would never try to record 2 different formats on my Blackmagic camera. It's just because it can do it, it doesn't mean that I would do it. So I think that's my opinion about that. I have the camera do exactly what I want it to do. If I want another format, I usually use a screen on the outside. I take HDMI out of it, run it into the screen or whatever, and I'm going to record on that video assist or something else in another format. But I usually don't have the camera do that. Mostly because I've had issues. Not exactly the issue that you've had, but in the past we've tried to do dual records off of other cameras and was never successful. so I wrote that off pretty quickly. So I think that you really, if the footage matters, you really want to make sure that every component. Where things break down is when we start asking our components to do more than one thing at a time, like more than what they're, even though they say they can do it, you end up in this, you want to keep on spreading out that load to make sure that everything's doing what it's good at and only having to do that one thing and not stretching it too hard. If, again, as the importance of the content goes up, you end up adding more components and more stability and more redundancy.
Also, whenever I see playback was at video high speed, it always says there's a frame rate mismatch somewhere in your system, and it's recording at some things. One of the blessing and the curse of the Blackmagic 6K Pros, which I'm sitting in front of right now, is that it has so many variable settings on its record thing. And I know there may be something that you're doing, Hasmik, that requires that Pro Raw record, but I would at least give it a test in just recording regular ProRes and see if everything solves. If it does, there's something in there that's bobbling those frames as they come through, and that's the key to me is that high-speed playback. So it doesn't like something about the frame cadence there. My 2 cents. Hopefully it works out for you. Next question.
This one's from Douglas Carmichael. I've noticed that the UAD SSL 4000 plugin can have a bit of a thicker tone when I engage the model preamp. I don't hear this with Brainworks or Waves SSL plugins. Why could that be?
And you want to address that, Alexander?
I've never owned an SSL 4000 console. I wish I had the money, the space, and the time to do that. But from friends in the industry that I know and from people that have owned SSL consoles, they say that the Universal Audio plugin is by far the most accurate. Many claim it is not just for this plugin, but also lots of other modeling plugins from Universal Audio. A lot of people claim that they are almost indistinguishable, or if not indistinguishable from the actual hardware. I know lots of engineers that love the LA2A compressor plugin, and they own the original Teletronics plugin, and they say that they cannot hear the difference between the hardware and the modeling plugin. So their plugins are definitely a cut above many others. And that's not a knock against Wave and Brainworks. They make good stuff, but this stuff is very hard to do accurately in software to get it that close to the hardware.
Let's go see if we can get the next question.
This one's from Aaron Cody in St. Louis, Missouri. I recently used and enjoyed the Magewell Pro Convert NDI to SDI. This was my first experience with USB RNDIS, and it was excellent. Does the panel have opinions on RNDIS? Why don't we see it in more products?
Jeffrey Powers, help us out.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I actually have the HDMI version of that Magewell, and it works great. Basically, it's called the Remote Network Driver Interface Specification. It's a specification that's a Microsoft specification, so it works on Microsoft, works on Linux pretty well. It has some problems working on Mac, so just keep that in mind. But when I went to program my box, I hooked it up to a Windows machine. It connected up, and I was able to do that. I could even do PTZ options, which was really great. I'd love to see it in a lot more. I have a couple other boxes I really wish that the protocol was in, but mostly the main reason why is this is a Microsoft protocol.
There you go. Before we finish up here, a couple of little notes. First and foremost, if you haven't heard yet and you've been thinking, I really enjoy Office Hours, I get a lot of value out of it, but I'd like to find a way to demonstrate my support. Boy, do we have one for you now. Head over to officehours.global/shop, and you will find the cool new Office Hours Global t-shirt. It is very cool. We're not trying to make this a cheap thing. I guess it's a very high quality shirt, and also $20 out of the price of that goes to directly support what we do here as a nonprofit. So if you're willing to do that, and if you have the resources to help us out, we truly appreciate it. Also, don't forget After Hours is in operation 24/7. So after we finish up here, that is here. And I also want to just pitch that on Monday, Extra Hours. That is where Grant Whitehead and the folks from Australia and the other part of the world help us out by having their specific show run on a slightly different platform, but you'll see familiar faces and all the rest of that. And because they're on the other side of the world, they are offset in time, which means that you don't have to get up if you're in some of the Asian and Australian areas at ridiculous times in the middle of the morning to watch the show there. So I'd recommend it. Hang in and pay attention to that. That will do it for today. Thank you so much for being a part of the Office Hours family and community. Tlaloc Traversal today, if I can slip over to it, looks like we did 37,000 miles, 60,000 kilometers. That is 293 million bananas for scale. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Little known fact that right after the show, I generally have banana. I just,
Do you really?
It gets stuck in your head. You're like, oh, I have.
Do you measure the scale of the banana? Because
No,
it's a banana for scale.
It's not. It's very close to a standard a office hours scale banana, which I think is 8 inches. But I think that it varies. It depends on whether you're buying at Whole Foods or Costco. Or we've had these ones at Safeway the other day. They were perfectly yellow on the outside and completely gooey and soft on the inside, and it was the grossest banana.
Oh,
I opened up one of them and I was like, "What am I?
Oh,
what are you
banana
doing?"
soup.
Yeah,
I
like,
always buy
it's like banana soup. Like I was like, "How did I don't even know how you create that?" So
I always buy green. I always buy green bananas.
oh, see, I never buy green because I
right
never feel like they get properly
they come
yellow.
They yellow a day after, so I always have a banana with my coffee.
That has not been my experience.
Now, do you go cold hard normal